All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Jeff. I'm joined by my best friends, Bernadette and Josh. We are talking about human performance technology today. And uh, in terms of our objectives, we have quite a few. So the first thing that we're going to do as part of this discussion is define and describe the field of human performance technology. We'll also differentiate between performance improvement and human performance technology. We'll explain why HPT is considered to be systematic. We'll define and describe what a performance gap is and explain the importance of a reasonable goal in terms of trying to close that gap between current level and desired levels of performance. And then finally, we will describe the importance of each of HPT's four principles: results, systems, values, and partnerships. And now I will pass it off to Bernadette to get us started.
Hi, good evening. The question that I'm answering is, what is human performance technology? HPT, if you will, that model is used in um, businesses and in industries specifically to solve performance-based issues. Um, Based on my analysis, they take a kind of a cognitive approach. It looks at performance based issues and takes a problem solving approach to solving those performance based issues. It's very much akin to the ADDIE model that uses analysis, design, development, implementation, and evaluation. The major difference being that, um, like ADDIE, it does depend on evaluation, but the evaluation part in the HPT model is cycled in throughout many of these phases. If you look at the model, you see the two-way arrows that show you evaluation is a part of the analysis phase. It's also a part of the intervention and selection phase, implementation, and then stands alone on itself. It also has some kind of, like, one thing that I noticed about it was is that it doesn't, even though I mentioned a cognitive approach, it doesn't isolate itself just to a cognitive approach. It uses and borrows from many different learning theories, different strategies, from observation of the environment and the individual in the intervention selection phase and in the analysis phase. And I found out what exactly it is the issue. Basically, a cycle of the HPT model looks like analysis, um, trying to identify what's important, which is the performance gap. That tends to be a formative evaluation of some sort. And then once the gap has been identified, then they use qualitative observations. This is the behaviorist kind of thing, and some quantitative data they may have gathered to identify the causes of the gap. Once they know what the performance gap is, what's causing the performance gap, then they access a myriad of different strategies to come up and create this intervention. And that in and of itself, that wording, that idea is behaviorist in itself, to intervene and to gives people some kind of education, kind of a learning experience to solve this problem. It's implemented, and then even and throughout the analysis, intervention selection, and the intervention phase, they are constantly reevaluating and evaluating the effectiveness of this intervention, evaluating what the problem is. Do they have the cause right? And what I particularly like and that they stressed about it was is that the intervention does not necessarily have to be technology based. It might be definitely no e-learning is necessary at all. They may realize that this might be something something as simple as re redesigning the role, splitting up some roles, those kinds of things. So it uses many different strategies, as I said, and it's pretty similar to ADDIE. So that's the human performance technology model in a nutshell.
Yeah, so I think I might be of the three of us. I'm the only one that has taken the HPT class, and I can just say from experience, I had no prior interaction with the field, and just as a function of going through that class, it was really I think eye-opening, just to think about on an organizational level, like when you identify a problem, I think all of us have the experience of like, well, if people aren't doing things the right way in the organization, they just need further training, right? And so I think what this HPT model really hammers home for me at least is really drilling down to determine like what it is that is the
Mhm.
root cause of, why people aren't doing the thing that they're supposed to be doing. Maybe it isn't a training issue, maybe it is like a workflow issue, and so you don't truly know the answer to that without going through like this degree of analysis. So
It could be a lack of resources.
right.
It could be the
Mhm.
wrong software. It could be anything. And I too appreciated that. And I just wanted to say that when we did this, I thought about you, Jeff, and your introduction and you talking about where you see yourself going with your career. So I was like, oh, okay. So this is exactly what he's been talking about. All right. Performance improvement versus human performance technology. So as I just explained, human performance technology is a model that does kind of heavily rely on technology as far as if they decide to create an e-learning or some kind of education intervention. But there are other performance and improvement strategies that could be implemented as well. And so after reading, the way I looked at it and I saw performance improvement as this larger, broader umbrella that houses or that, that many of these different performance improvement strategies kind of fall under. And HPT happens to be one of them. Um, One way that the book talked about it, it was like in the context of performance improvement. Performance improvement is described as a broader effort to enhance output and effectiveness through various interventions, which may or may not include technology based solutions. Performance improvement encompasses strategies aimed at helping individuals or organizations achieve better results, whether through improving knowledge, skill, or work systems. And HBT is a specific systematic approach to improving productivity and competence. It involves comprehensive analysis of the gap between desired performance and actual performance. So it's really more about identifying what that gap is. This is where personnel are now. This is where we would like them to be. And that gap is what HPT is most suited for, identifying and then trying its best to bridge that gap and close that gap in the learner.
Yeah, I appreciate you kind of going over this one in some more detail because when I was doing the reading on my own, I got to that part where it said human performance technology and performance improvement are synonymous. They are the same thing. This is the means and this is the kind of accomplishment. So I think it's nice to know that I guess we're able to have this conversation where I'm able to learn it, understand it a little bit better from the two of you with maybe a little bit better understanding, a little bit more experience from Jeff
Yeah,
with this one in particular. Um, so that's yeah, I just appreciate it to help me understand that a little bit better because I was like, okay, they're the same. I don't know how they're different, but
I don't think you're
they're
wrong.
different,
I
kind
just
of.
think like it's kind of like, all right, so there's melons and there's watermelons, there's cantaloupe,
That's a good
right?
analogy.
So that's basically how it is. It's like performance improvement is the the class,
That's
so
like
to say.
the end goal is the
Right,
improvement, and then
right. But
the
one
technology
of
is
the
the
many,
systems.
yeah. One of the
ways that we can
many
get there. Yeah.
performance improvement strategies is human performance technology. That's the way I understand it. But Jeff is our guru here.
I'm never going to be
Yes,
able
Jeff
to
is
forget the
the
melon
boss.
analogy. So okay, so this is where we are going to shift gears and talk about why, or try to answer the question, why is human performance technology considered a systematic approach? And I think just even looking at some of the stuff that Bernadette has already shown and talked about, there is a degree of analysis that occurs at the very beginning of this process that is fundamental in terms of legitimizing whatever recommendations or whatever interventions you're recommending or even designing. Having taken the class, there's a big book where it actually gives you, here are examples of interventions that you could provide for, certain situations, right? So um, even with those provided, like that's not the be all end all. You could like create your own. And so again, rather than just kind of trying to throw random things at the wall and seeing what sticks, the analysis part of this process is systematic, is very step by step oriented. It's involving a lot of different stakeholders in order to get to the point where you can have a certain degree of like validity to what it is that you're recommending. And here is a perfect representation of that system from start to finish. This is, I think, literally from the textbook that is from from the class that focuses exclusively on HPT. So you have the performance analysis component where the desired performance isn't just like pulled out of a hat. It is fundamentally based on the organization's mission, vision, values, whatever their goals are. Like if we're from like a K-12 perspective, what is your strategic plan, for your campus or for your district? That is going to be, driving that organizational analysis component versus what is actually happening, right? And so what is actually happening is going to be impacted by different layers of influence all the way from like a global level all the way down to the individual level, right? And so this is we'll talk about it later, like the gap analysis component. But once you have this performance analysis complete, is now when you're in the position to be able to consider different interventions. And I think Bernadette made a good point. It's like not every intervention is technology based. It could literally be just changing how the work is designed or flowed in order to make it a little bit more efficient, right? So like that doesn't necessarily require technology. And again, going back to what Bernadette's already talked about, is a key component of what makes this a systematic approach is the degree of evaluation that is occurring at each phase, from the performance analysis phase, the intervention phase, and then the implementation phase. So I'm also going to talk about that performance gap, just drilling down a little bit further. And so just to be clear, the performance gap is that I guess the disconnect or the dissonance between what you want to happen as an organization versus what is happening, the gap between the desired performance and the actual performance. And so if we were to isolate that one section of the system, it's right here. And again, the desired performance, we're not just making up what we want or hope people to do performance wise in their job or their role. It is driven by very specific criteria, which is why it is important to have stakeholder input from the top all the way to the bottom of the organization, right? So whatever changes are going to be made as a result of this process, one of the things I remember taking away from the class is that you have to have, this is not the right word, but like basically like cheerleaders. Like you have your organizational leadership really supporting and backing the changes that need to be made, in order to kind of get everybody else in line, right? So, without that type of leadership, you run the risk of undermining the effectiveness of whatever it is that you're trying to implement. And so having a strong vision, mission, values component to this is important to defining what the desired performance is. But again, the actual performance is really going to be dictated by a lot of different factors. Everything from, what is going on culturally, socially, to like, literally, do you have a desk, right? Do you have the required resources to do the work? What sort of procedures do you have in place to get the work done? But also even like from the individual perspective, like do you have the knowledge or the capacity in order to achieve what is expected of you, right? And so ultimately, once you identify what that gap is, then you go into this phase of trying to figure out like what is the root cause of that gap, right? Is it an environmental factor? Is it because of a lack of feedback? Is it a lack of incentives, like motivation wise? Or is it from an individual perspective? Do we as workers potentially like lack the skills and knowledge to be able to achieve what it is that is desired?
All right, my turn. So I'll be talking about goals and just kind of what they are. Reasonable goals, I should say. So reasonable goals are important because a reasonable goal is something that can be achieved in an appropriate amount of time. It's something that I can do quickly, and it's going to bring a lot of value to my organization. So during the reading, the two things that kind of popped into my mind while I was thinking about goals was the zone of proximal development and then SMART goals. So the zone of proximal development is if I take a person that is here, that yellow dot in the center, this is what you can do without any help at all. Spread that out a little bit into that lighter blue zone. This is what you can do with some support and some help. And then outside of that is things I can't do at all. So thinking about goals, if I'm doing this analysis and I'm doing this evaluation for an organization, I know that their workers are in this area. I can't give them a goal that's beyond their abilities. That's not going to benefit anyone. That's going to cause delays. It's going to increase costs for the company, and it's going to cause frustration with employees. They're not going to be able to do the thing, even if we're there supporting them and giving them whatever technology or supports that are available. It's not worth it. And then SMART goals, that's something we talk a lot about in K-12. This is how we have students create goals for themselves, so their own personal individual goals for whatever academic success we're trying to get from them this year. But goals should be specific. They should be measurable, attainable, and that kind of goes back to that zone of proximal development. It has to be reasonable. It has to be relevant, and it has to be time-based. So specific goals, I can't just go in and say, I want to do better at math. That's not specific. That's too broad. There's too many things that I have to be able to do to be good at math. It has to be measurable. So something that came across a lot with the HPT model is that analysis, that measurement of value of is, I think the example they used a lot was like call centers. Is your call time getting shorter? Are you able to do whatever thing you're trying to do faster or better? We need some way of measuring that change. Otherwise, there's no proof that we provided any value by doing this.
Mhm.
And again, it needs to be attainable. It needs to be something that we can actually get done. I can't expect my fifth graders to start doing calculus next month. That's not attainable. I can maybe expect them to divide. That would be cool. But it kind of depends on the person. And then relevant. We want our goals to be relevant to our organization. And I think that's something that maybe necessarily doesn't apply so much when you're thinking about the kind of professional organizational level, because they're going to know what goal they want. Is they're already going to have that kind of designed, and it'll be relevant for them it's going to be something that saves them time or money. And then that last part is it needs to be time based. It needs to be done in a reasonable amount of time, and of course that time frame is going to vary depending on what it is. If it's a simple goal that we need to get everyone cards that give them steps by steps of how to do things, that's something that can be knocked out in a couple weeks or something like that. But if it's a bigger, larger goal, then that time frame is going to be a little bit longer.
Yeah, so I don't know about you, Bernadette, but like when I looked at this particular question, I also thought about SMART goals and specifically about like I looked at reasonable, and that was to me a synonym for attainable. I don't know if that you had like
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
same reaction, but um like I for like the position I have at UT, every year we are asked to like draft SMART goals for ourselves in the roles that we have, and um, something that I have found is very helpful is like if you have a nugget of an idea of a goal for yourself, this is where Chat GPT is very helpful. You can say,
It is.
take this nugget of a goal and craft it into a SMART goal, and it's not bad. It's a good it helps do some of that heavy lifting, and
Yeah.
if you're trying to help children do this, go through this exercise, that might be a good way to sort of demonstrate the utility of uh Chat GPT.
Understood. I agree with you both. I got attached. I through the reading, what kind of stood out to me was not just attainable, but relevant. I felt
Mm-hmm.
like the analysis phase definitely kind of sorted out or sits in that relevant part. Is this relevant to
Yeah.
the needs of the organization? Is this relevant to the needs of the learner? How relevant is this to the overall outcome? And so yeah, the definitely obtain, I mean the whole thing, but the reasonable for me, the relevant and the attainable definitely stood out because in this analysis phase, it's they spend a good amount of time meeting with stakeholders, finding out what their needs are, really getting a really good holistic picture of what this organization does, what it looks like now, where they want to look, where they want to be, what they want it to look like, and then choose and create the intervention based on that. And so I thought for me that really said that these two words, attainable and relevant, were kind of driving this process.
I will say, like, I wasn't expecting like the zone of proximal development to come up in the context of this, but like I think Josh, you did a great job of really being
Mm-hmm.
like relevant to this discussion of reasonable goals. So like
Yeah, I don't know if I explained it as it's
no, no,
intended to be explained, but that's just kind of what it popped into my head as. It's just,
yeah.
oh, okay. I
No,
think
I
about
think
this
you're
often
absolutely
when we're doing things is I can't expect my low achieving sped students to be multiplying and dividing decimals and fractions on their own. I That's not something that's achievable for them. So their goals are
In terms
closer
of
to
that,
what they need.
in terms of that desired performance, which may be a
Yeah.
Mhm. And then I think it fits perfectly.
yeah.
I think as you brought it up, I thought, yeah, that is what they're doing in the analysis phase. Maybe it's not always what they can and cannot do, but
Mm.
maybe it's sometimes more about well, it is the can and cannot do skill sets, right?
Yeah.
Taking away things that might sit in this role that don't really fit this role, that kind of thing. So yeah, I think it was. I really when I saw it, I was like, yeah, he's right. I didn't think of it while I was reading. He's absolutely right about analysis being there.
Thank you. All right, and then our last little bit here is just the importance of those four key principles of HPT. So I'd say probably most valuable one is number one is results. when you go through this process and you are performing these analyses and you're evaluating and you're getting support from your stakeholders, you're getting people on board, you have to have results at the end of the day. If you're not able to produce results, then the training or whatever implementation you created was a waste of everyone's time and everyone's money. And I know I've been to trainings where I come out of it and I say, that was a waste of my time. I appreciate that I still got paid for it, but I would have rather be doing something else. So we, I guess, as designers and practitioners of this, want to be aware that we need to be bringing just measurable outcomes and results for people that they can continue to measure, or that we can continue to measure further and further down the line, showing ideally growth in performance and growth in value for their company. And then systems is the next one, that systematic approach. It's kind of like what Bernadette was saying earlier. We're addressing a whole bunch of different factors within any specific situation. And we're looking at specific individual performance. We're looking at environmental factors, like is the room just too cold? People don't want to get up, and they don't want to get up. It's cold. They want to be cozy at their desk in a blanket. And then individual factors: do the workers have the skills that they need? Do they need training? Do they just need do they need a hotline phone number to call instead of having to schedule a meeting with someone? What can we put in place systematically throughout this organization that can support and build that for them? And then value. Is the cost of what we're providing outweighed by the costs that they are generating after? And guess that really ties in with the results. Is if we did what we were supposed to do, if we performed that gap analysis, if we provided the appropriate supports, provided the appropriate technology if necessary, is the value there? If it is, that's fantastic. Then if it's not, then probably not going to be seen back there again. And then the last one, partnership. Jeff kind of mentioned this with getting people, I forget the exact word you used, but kind of getting people on board with your plan.
Buy-in.
Buy-in. Yeah. You can have the great plan and everyone can say like, yeah, hurrah, that's amazing. But if people aren't buying in, if people aren't getting on board and saying, we're going to do it, it all kind of falls apart there. So you have to be able to build those relationships with your stakeholders and your SMEs and your participants to say that we need you to do this thing. This thing will help you, and you have to make it not difficult to use. If it's too difficult to do, then people are going to say, that's too much, I don't want to do it. As an example, I just went to a training to go over our brand new science textbook. Mm-hmm. The consensus across all grade levels, across the whole district, is we hate it. It's too hard, it's complicated, it's too much. So our training was designed to increase our performance. We went and we talked about how to use the book. Fantastic, awesome. Now, our job, as I would be the kind of the organization here, our job is to go back and actually get on board and use the things that they did, that they taught us. If I don't do that, if my team doesn't do that, then the training was worthless. Because then we go back to that square one step. Excuse me.
Well, what I would say is, circling back around to one of the first things I said at the very beginning is having gone through the HPT class, was one of the first classes I took in this program. I struggled at first to try to figure out, like, why is this relevant I want to be like an instructional designer. This feels way too like zoomed out big for really what I'm interested in. However, like as I progressed, I gained an appreciation for where an instructional designer would fit into this, right? So like in that the intervention stage, all of those things that would be designed in order to help close the performance gap, like that's got to come from somewhere, right? And like that's, I think, where I think logically the instructional designer really kind of fits into the broader human performance technology piece. But Yeah, I was surprised by the end, like how much I actually like low key enjoyed that class. Like it really stretched my brain to think like in terms of like the organization that I work for right now. I recognize things that could be maybe done differently. And so like what would that look like, right? And so it doesn't always have to be more training. It could just be something a little
Mhm.
bit more simple of just
A
making,
guidebook that people could actually use.
yeah, making
Or
information just accessible, right? Like it's just, so I don't know if anybody else has any closing thoughts to add.
No, I felt the more I read and the more of the videos I watched and just the more I got into HPT and HPI, the more I started thinking about kind of like what you said, what's going on in my organization? Where am I seeing these things? And that's when I was like, oh, wait, that training I just did was HPT. They wanted us to do better, they wanted us to plan better. And so it made me think about now I'm curious how it's going to go. So there's, I don't know if y'all remember, there's that like graphic in the book in like the second chunk where it's like training is awesome, or we think it's really awesome. Everyone's gonna do amazing, but really it's like, you just do a little bit better, and then if you don't do anything with it, it goes all the way back down again.
yeah.
So I'm curious to see what happens in the next 4 or 5 months to see where people's opinions lie.
Hopefully sustainable improvement.
Well, I mean, I
Hopefully,
think, I think I'll get off a little off topic with that, but I think it does tie in. I think one of the problems in our industry is that they kind of use bits and pieces of this model, but they don't really,
yeah.
but the analysis part where they can really get it right as far as, is this an attainable goal? Is this relevant? Do we really understand the work environment, what our teachers need, what our students need? That doesn't happen. And so they tend
Mm-hmm.
to throw things at us, and then we're sitting there in a PD when we could be on a lake and like looking like, yeah.
Well, I think just to piggyback off of what you're saying, Bernadette, is like my understanding of this process from start to finish is long. Like if you really
Mm-hmm.
want to do this right, you have to really invest the time, resources, energy, and it's yeah. So if you just want to take shortcuts and just do PD here or there, you have to accept maybe the reality that it's not going to be as effective as putting in the work.
Mm-hmm.
Again, this has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but why would
I think it does. I mean, it's I
you
think
don't have to do that when you have a workforce of people who are A-type personalities? They're going to make it work anyway. So you just do what you got to do, and there you go.
yeah, it's tough. I think that's maybe the lesson, the moral to take away is
Mhm.
it's hard.
It is.
Everything's hard.
But I enjoyed it though.
Everything good is hard.
Yeah.
I got excited about the model. I really did. I
Mm-hmm.
saw a lot of different things that we've been exposed to. I see a lot of backward design in this as well, and I'm very partial to starting at the end. So I was kind of excited, and I wanted, now that I know that there's a class in it, I'm looking forward to
Well, that's
learning.
good. I'm glad I could maybe do my small part to promote it. So I think this is a good time to close things out. So I appreciate
Okay,
Yeah.
both of you. I enjoyed this. I don't know about you, but
I did.
Yeah.
I had a good
Thank you
time.
both.
All right. I'm gonna stop the record. Where is it? Oh my gosh, where is the recording? Oh, we're still recording as I'm trying to figure this out.
This is
It's
the
okay.
worst.
Just
So
edit
much
it.
pressure.
Let me stop sharing. Let me start there. Okay.